friends, this video on biological classification part 22 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. Understand this lesson on biological classification. So let us look at the first question. Discuss how classification systems have undergone several changes over a period of time. Now, when I talk about classification systems, so what were the different ways of classifying living organisms? So the first attempt was given by Aristotle. He tried to divide all plants into three types: herbs, shrubs and trees based upon their height. He tried to divide animals based on their habitats like aerial, aquatic and terrestrial. He also tried to divide animals based upon the presence or absence of blood. But all these classification didn't help. That's because this way of classification was not very fruitful, because organisms, even though they are sharing the same habitat, they were very much different from each other in their nutrition, in their structure and in so many things. So it was not a very effective way of classification. So again, over a period of time came up Linnaeus two-kingdom classification, where he classified entire living organisms into two groups, that is plants and animals. But then it was found that it is not only the plants and animals which exist on this earth. There are a hell lot of organisms which do not fall under the category of plants and which neither fall on the category of animals, because for Linnaeus, plants were those organisms which cannot move and which can perform photosynthesis. And animals are those organisms which depend on others for their food and they can move from place to place. But that was not the case. There were many other organisms which could also produce their own food, even though they were not photosynthetic. There were organisms which could prepare their own food, but they were also able to move from one place to another. So this two-kingdom classification was also a failure. So again, after some time, came up the Whittaker's five-kingdom classification, where he classified all living organisms into five kingdoms, that is Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae and Animalia. Now this classification was effective. That's because the basis of this classification was cell structure, nutrition and body organization. So now the unicellular and multicellular were segregated. Now the eukaryotes and prokaryotes were also segregated. Now also the organisms whose body structure were simpler and those who were with a complex body organization were also separated. So that is how this classification systems underwent a change over a period of time, starting from Aristotle, then Linnaeus and finally Whittaker. Let us look at the next question. State two economically important uses of heterotrophic bacteria and archaebacteria. Heterotrophic bacteria, that is the bacteria which depend on others for their food. So first of all, they act as decomposers, that is they feed on dead and decaying matter, and that is why they help to clean the atmosphere. Production of curd from milk. So conversion of milk to curd happens with the help of lactobacillus. Preparation of antibiotics. So these are some of the important uses of heterotrophic bacteria. Talking about archaebacteria, which are the ancient bacteria, they help in the production of methane gas or biogas and therefore helps in the sewage treatment. You remember we talked about the different types of archaebacteria depending upon the type of environment they live in. There we talked about the methanogens. So the methanogens are the one which help in the production of methane gas. So this is a very important use of archaebacteria. It also helped to study the early atmospheric conditions on Earth, because these archaebacteria were the ancient bacteria and they can survive in extreme conditions. So this also tells us that the environmental conditions in that primitive Earth was also extreme. So it gives us a clue to guess how the environmental condition was during that time on Earth. Okay. So let us look at the next question. What is the nature of cell walls in diatoms? So the cell walls of diatoms are of important significance, right? Because you remember we spoke about the diatomaceous earth. Right. So the cell walls are made up of silica. And how is the structure of the cell walls? It consists of two shells which exactly fit into each other. The way the lid of your tiffin box fits into the box. That is how the two shells exactly fit into each other. And these are so tough and rigid that they are almost indestructible. So even though the diatoms die, the cell walls remain, and these deposits of cell wall keep on accumulating in their habitats, and this forms a layer known as diatomaceous earth, which is again of significance. Find out, what do the terms algal bloom and red tides signify? As I mentioned before also, algal bloom is nothing but increase in the population of algae. So it is a huge increase in the population of algae. So suddenly if the number or the population of algae increases too much, we say it is algal bloom. It results in discoloration of water. Now if algal bloom happens for a green algae, so the water turns green in color. If algal bloom happens for a blue algae, the water turns blue in color. So it can cause discoloration of water. Red tide is nothing but algal bloom. It is a kind of algal bloom caused by red colored algae, dinoflagellates. So these red dinoflagellates actually results in algal bloom, where the color of the water turns red. So water turns red in color. It is extremely harmful for other aquatic life forms. So this increase in population of the dinoflagellates is dangerous or threatening to all other life forms like fishes. So this is how it looks like. So you see, normally the water is blue in color, but a certain portion has suddenly become red. That is due to huge increase in the population of this red colored dinoflagellates. How are viroids different than viruses? Now, as I said, viroids are nothing but they are virus-like organisms. But a few difference which we noted was, in viruses we have a protein coat called capsid which protects the genetic material, but in viroids there is no protein coat. Again, viruses may contain single-stranded RNA or double-stranded RNA or DNA, but viroids contain free RNA. If you talk about the size, viruses are anyway small, they are smaller than bacteria. But if you talk about the viroids, they are even smaller than viruses. So the size of the viroids are also smaller than that of viruses. The next one, plants are autotrophic. That is, they can prepare their own food. Can you think of some plants that are partially heterotrophic? That means, can you think of any plant which can depend on others for their food? One of the very common example is the pitcher plant. This is how it looks like. You have a pitcher-like structure. As soon as an insect comes in, it takes the insect inside and this lid closes. And that is how the insect is trapped and it is eaten up. So that is how it is heterotrophic. Similarly, there is a Venus flytrap. So if you look, this is how the plant looks like. So it opens like this. An insect, as soon as it gets an insect inside, this lid will close up. And then the insect will be eaten and digested. So these are some examples of plants which are heterotrophic. That is, they depend on other living organisms for their food. What do the terms phycobiont and mycobiont signify? Now you remember we spoke about lichen. So what was lichen? It was a symbiotic association between algae and fungi. It was an association between algae and fungi where both of them get benefit from each other. Right? So what was the benefit that they were getting? The algae was preparing food for the fungi and the fungi was giving shelter to the algae. So this algal component is known as phycobiont. The word phyco itself means algae. So the algal component of this symbiotic association is known as phycobiont and the fungal component is known as mycobiont. You just remember that the word phyco means algae. So phycobiont is algal component and the fungal component is mycobiont. So as I said, algae provides food to the fungi because the algae is capable of preparing its own food, and the fungi provide shelter and protection to the algae. So this is how a lichen looks like. Give a comparative account of the classes of kingdom fungi under the mode of nutrition. Now, we spoke about the different types of fungi based upon their modes of reproduction and their structure. That's because that is where the main difference lies. Now, can you compare them all based upon their nutrition? So, let's have a look. Phycomycetes, they are obligate parasites. That means they need some other organisms to complete their life cycle. So sometime or the other they need another organism. Ascomycetes, see, fungi, they are all heterotrophic. So there is no chance of any autotrophic nutrition. So all heterotrophic, but inside that heterotrophic some might be decomposers, some might be saprophytes or parasites. So Ascomycetes can be saprophytic or decomposers or parasitic. It can be either of them. Basidiomycetes, like mushrooms, they are mostly decomposers. However, some of them are parasitic. If you talk about Deuteromycetes, they can be saprophytes. Mostly, in fact, they are saprophytes, but sometimes they can also be parasitic. So with this, I'll conclude this lesson, and I hope that this lesson on biological classification would have helped you. So see you all in the next lesson. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.